Hey guys, thanks for checking out another video. Today we're going to be ranking the 4 studio albums released by In Flames in the 1990s. Now I'm sure you're already thinking 4, I think you're missing a few. Well, let me explain why I'm keeping this to 4 records. While it's true that Lunar Strain and Subterranean were separate releases, anyone getting into this band at the turn of the century or later, the vast majority of current fans, would have learned about Lunar Strain and Subterranean through the big re-release when they were consolidated onto one record. I'm also focusing strictly on studio albums, which is why Black Ash Inheritance won't be counted here. Black Ash was more of an extended player EP offshoot of the Jester Race, and only had one new song, a demo for a future release, an acoustic medley covering all their material to date, and a live version of Behind Space. So again, focusing strictly on studio albums released in the 90s, I'll just be ranking the Lunar Strain LP, Subterranean EP as a single release, the Jester Race, Whoracle, and Colony. At number 4, I have to go with Lunar Strain Subterranean on Wrong Again Records. Right off the bat, I have to admit that Colony was the first In Flames album I ever heard. So when going back in the discography and discovering Lunar Strain Subterranean, I found that I was hungry for a more organized sound, the sound present on the band's subsequent albums. Back in 1994 and 1995, In Flames were still very much figuring themselves out and taking the band in a number of directions that didn't fully align with what would become the signature Gothenburg melodic death metal sound. A lot of traditional Swedish death metal was still present in the guitar riffs, with a number of sloppy transitions and failed attempts at more progressive parts really sticking out like sore thumbs. A big example of this is the original version of Behind Space, so I'm so glad they went back and re-recorded the song for 1999's Colony album. Again, I'm not trashing Lunar Strain Subterranean, this is just an example of the band clearing their throat and stretching their legs for the first time. Without this record, it's possible the signature Gothenburg sound we all know and love might not exist, at least not exactly how we know it today. So I have to give credit where credit is due. At number 3, I have to say Colony. Don't get me wrong, I love this album, these songs are incredible. The interlude in Zombie Inc. is one of the greatest instrumental passages I've ever heard. Embody the Invisible is one of the best album openers I've ever heard, period. But when it comes to the kind of melodic death metal I enjoy the most, Colony is a little too polished for me. Some of the clean vocal parts just take away from the dirty vibe I love from this music, and both the rhythm and lead guitar tones come through a little too bright for me. One of my favorite aspects of melodic death metal is how some bands can find the perfect balance between filth and melody, and while Colony is one of the greatest melodic death records of all time, I feel that In Flames found that balance better on previous works. At number 2, Whoracle. Again, this is one of the greatest melodic death metal albums of all time. The clean interlude in Jester Script Transfigured is one of my favorite things to play on guitar. Dialogue with the Stars is such a brilliant instrumental. The Everything Counts cover is so sick. Jotun, much like Embody the Invisible, is one of the best album openers I've ever heard. Even the closing instrumental, the title track, Whoracle, is so haunting and bone-chilling. I love this album, but if I absolutely have to choose, I'm going with the Jester Race for number 1. The Jester Race. When I talk about the perfect balance between filth and melody, this is what I'm talking about. Even the clean acoustic passages on this album sound earthy and immersed in the dirty elements of the natural world. The intro to Moonshield is spellbinding. Artifacts of the Black Rain has one of the greatest guitar hooks I've ever heard. The vocals are a bit monotone at times, but Anders Fridén's debut with the band was so strong. And I love the heavy reverb on the lower growls, something further adding to the Haunted Forest-esque side to this album. I love the album cover so much. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so you'd think the Colony cover would be my favorite, but I love the levitating moving castle with the Jester mask on the Jester Race cover so much. I even have a tattoo of the cracked stone version of the Jester head. I normally have to point it out to newer In Flames fans who are most familiar with either the more animated style of the Jester mask on newer albums or the simple line work the band uses as their logo sometimes. I also want to add that although I wasn't a huge fan of the song Foregone Part 2, I'm really excited about Foregone, the new In Flames album due in February of 2023. I think this is their best work in the past 20 years, and 3 of the 4 singles they've released for the record so far are just killer. They truly harken back to the 90s, which is very much how I prefer my In Flames. How do you feel about the 90s In Flames albums? How do you rank them? Do you prefer newer In Flames to original In Flames? Let me know in the comments. I love reading your feedback. Please give me a like, subscribe, and a comment if you like this video, and we'll see you on the next one.